Hey, welcome to React Roundup, the podcast where we keep you updated on all things React related. This show is sponsored by Raygun and produced by Top End Devs and Envoy. Top End Devs is where we create top end devs to get top end pay and recognition while working on interesting problems and making meaningful community contributions. And Envoy is a company that provides the most client-friendly business model for software outsourcing. With Envoy, clients can hire design and software development services and only pay once the task is delivered and approved. In today's episode, we will talk about React Medium Image Zoom, which is a library that allows you to create the same effect that Medium has with their images, that allows you to basically click on an image and it zooms up and takes up your entire screen in a very nice animation, smooth animation, and then you can just go back to your navigation afterwards and put the image back where it once was. So if you like that effect that Medium has and you want to have it on your website or in your web application, today we're going to be talking about this library and some other things related to the creator of this library. So let me introduce him. But first, my name is Lucas Paganini, your host in the podcast, and joining me in today's episode is also the host, Peter Osa.
Hi everyone.
Now, our very special guest that I was just mentioning, the creator of this library, Robert Pierce, which is a software engineer working professionally for over 13 years with focus on JavaScript and TypeScript, but also interest in some other cool things such as Haskell, Rust, and of course, as all good developers, a really nice interest in functional programming. He was also a teacher at a few coding boot camps and also spoke at meetups, conferences, and has been using React since 2013. He also contributes a lot to open source. So if you enjoyed this library, make sure to check out his GitHub sponsor page and help him out so we can keep this awesome project up and running. Robert, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Lucas.
Awesome. Robert, let's just get to it, man. I try to give a really quick pitch about the library, but do you want to extend it a bit further? Are there any specific details about the library that I think it's relevant for our audience to be aware of before we dive into how you built it and how it works?
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about how a project that is, I guess, 8 years old now, can drift a little bit. And so it started out trying to be a clone of what Medium was doing, and then as time went on, and based on what we could do in the browser, all the different things we have access to now, like like picture elements and all the different scenarios people might have with wanting to zoom divs with background images, or object fit, contain, cover, object position, all these different possibilities. Where the project is now is, it's drifted a little bit from how the exact one on Medium feels, but I think it still maintains the essence.
Awesome. Yeah, that does make sense. And that's a long time, like 8 years maintaining that. First off, congrats for maintaining, because a lot of open source projects, they just get abandoned in a way shorter period of time. I do want to know, what do you think was the success of this project being maintained for so long? Were you able to find other maintainers? Are you the sole maintainer? Like, what advice could you give to other people thinking of maintaining or creating open source projects?
That's a great question. So a bit of it, so that it's twofold for me. I think it's partially the people who help contribute to it, which can take the form of just people using it and raising issues. It can take the form of people wanting to solve some of the issues, as well as some people who just have ideas that they think could help, and they are willing to talk that through with you. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect for me was, hey, this hobby project that I thought was cool and that I kind of wanted for my own things started to become popular. And then it not being perfect or really exactly what I needed all the time. Or maybe I didn't like some of the code, or I got more educated, or not educated, I got more skilled at React or JavaScript or with something. It started to be something that I knew people were going to look at. And so I wanted to be proud of it. And so that's something that kept me coming back, is like, this is a kind of like a people have like dot file gardens or like code gardens. This was my like React code garden that I is something that I could keep tending to. And as I grew in skill, I could then apply that skill to the project. So yeah, I think having a supportive community of people that use it and want it to get better, plus knowing that this is something that you're putting out into the world and wanting that to reflect your skill and your attention to detail. I think those things made this project what it is today.
I like that. I like that very much. Like thinking about it as a place where you can output your growth as a developer and kind of like look back onto it and keep rebuilding it, like just literally rewriting it as you gain more and more knowledge and you feel that you are able to do a better job. I like that. Interesting. And but with regards to other contributors, were you able to like create this net, and how is that, or is it actually mainly you, the main contributor?
It's definitely mainly me. And I think that something that's important to remember over time is that, like, when people get involved with open source projects, it might be on a one-off basis, or, at best, it's probably on a temporary basis. Asking people to show up for something that they don't get paid for is a big ask, and it gets harder and harder as people, they change jobs. Maybe they had more time, more free time with their job before. Maybe the new job is more demanding. Maybe their life scenarios change, or maybe they just, they're not interested in contributing anymore. And so I've had a handful of people that have been over the years, during different time periods, were super helpful with their, testing things out, coming up with ideas, contributing some code. But eventually that would kind of fizzle out, but in a way that's okay, where it's like, okay, we got through this thing. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. You're a contributor. You're in the README in the all contributors section. And every now and then I might try to ping them on, an issue or a pull request and say, hey, have you experienced this as well? But, these things can be a little bit temporary. And so that's what I've tried to do, is like, if someone's asking a question, try to respond as immediately as I can. If I can't fix the issue for a long time, which is sometimes the case, I'll try to check back in periodically and say, hey, I haven't forgotten about this. I haven't forgotten about you, the person who's putting yourself out there to raise an issue online. And so in trying to do that, I try to be kind to everyone, but it doesn't mean I can always solve the issue quickly, but I can respond quickly. And that, I think, that keeps people coming back. And I think open source projects that are clear with where the project is and where it's going, like, is it active? Is this something you're not going to fix? Can you just respond to them and just say, hey, I don't have time for this right now? Stuff like that will, I think, be useful in maintaining some sort of community, even if that community isn't involved very often.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like thinking about the people that are submitting issues and just using it as contributors as well. And in a way that is very true. Like they're giving you feedback on what they seem is missing. So in a way, they're definitely contributing as well and helping you make better decisions for the future of the product. That's nice. Okay. Um, I would like to get into the intricacies of how the code actually works, but before, Peter, do you have anything you want to say? Question?
Yeah, so I think I have one question, and it's on the basis of like maintenance. So like maintaining the open source project, right? So is it that maybe you're kind of primarily main maintainer for that, or like do you have help from other contributors to the project? Like maybe for example, if you're not available, can you like assign it to someone or so? Like how does that process go? Yeah.
Um, I couldn't quite make out the full question, so I'll try to repeat it. Was it about if I'm too busy and assigning issues to other people?
Yeah. Do you have like a system that helps you maybe if you're kind of engaged, maybe you can't actually work on that issue, then you can actually assign it to someone else. Like you have that.
Yeah, I've not had too much luck with that. One thing I tried before was during Hacktoberfest, which I think it's DigitalOcean puts that on in October, or yeah, in October. And I've labeled some issues as Hacktoberfest before, and I think it was a few years ago. I had one or two issues get picked up, and I tried to write the issues as to make it as clear and plain as I could about what the issue is, where I think the problem or the solution may be in the code, what the expected outcome would be, and a few of those have been picked up. But right now, I mean, it's mostly just me. I don't really have anyone to turn to. Even some people I still work with that have contributed to the project, they've got other things going on. So if an issue comes up, it's me. I can ask people. Um, what I do in the issues is if there's something that comes up, I will ask them to please provide some sort of reproduction case, whether that's in Code Sandbox or a project that they create. And if they don't do it, someone else might show up and do that for them, which is really nice. And then I can interact and go back and forth with them, or they can sort of figure out, the best way to set the issue up themselves in the issue. And then that really helps me save a lot of time and, dive in, find out what the problem is and say, oh, okay, all right, let's get in there and fix it.
Nice. Okay.
My
Sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's nice actually. I think it's actually very commendable though. Like taking all this and you share that is kind of commendable because I it's actually kind of a very large amount of work on your end to kind of, handle the issues and also kind of interact with the people facing the issues. Yeah. So this is actually very nice as well. I think probably we can actually even, if you don't mind, maybe on the show, maybe we can actually ask for assistant, like people who can actually help to maintain as well. I don't know if it's fine because I know it's definitely kind of cool if maybe you have like maybe other people that can assist you in maintaining as well, so that yeah, the pressure won't be on you kind of, yeah.
Yep, for sure. Okay, let's get a bit into the intricacies of the code because I think there are multiple different ways in which you could have coded that, especially now with view transitions, which are recently we're landing on Chrome, but I'm not sure if they're already stable in other browsers as well. But I'm sure that you didn't use that because the library exists for a very long time. I also don't even know if now that this exists, if it would be a better way to do this or if it's better suited for other use cases. But yeah, let's just go through how it is right now, and then we can even talk about if you have an urge, like an itch to refactor it even further now to adhere to modern technologies and stuff like that. But right now, how does it work?
All right, so this is going to be some nitty gritty stuff. I'll start at the top. I'll start with like what is actually happening. I do want to get to where the project eventually will go, but I think we'll save that for a minute. I think it's cool. It involves web components, and we'll see. So the way that this works is based on the need of what it needs to do. So what it needs to do is if you're gonna put something on the screen that is clickable, so like if someone can click on it or tap on it, then it needs to also be accessible to a keyboard or other assistive device that can, focus through a page. Okay, so we need to be able to focus on it with a keyboard. We need to be able to set that up to be also screen reader accessible. And people have said to me in the past, they're like, well, why are you doing all of this with a modal? Why are you doing all this stuff with keyboard? Like blind people with blindness don't, why would they want to enhance an image? Why would they want to make it bigger on the screen? And when I hear that, I politely inform people that, it's not just people that are blind that use keyboards and screen readers. People with low visual acuity, there could be people with cognitive disabilities. There's many, many, many reasons why people might use other things than just a mouse. So the absolute simplest thing you could do is, okay, I click on that and I, just transform that image that's on the screen right there and make it take up the whole screen. But, that's modal behavior. And so if someone were trying to do this with a keyboard, or they were using it with a screen reader and they were blind, they might have that image still up, taking up the whole screen, but they might be trying to navigate through everything that's behind it. So that's why it uses a modal. Modals have a modal dialogue. Those have very specific rules where none of the content, none of the input controls, anything behind that modal should not be available to a keyboard, screen reader, any assistive device. So, okay, that means we need to be in a modal now. So what do we need to do to get there? We've got an image, and we want to make it seem like we're taking that image and we're zooming it up to the viewport screen size. Well, how do we do that with a modal? Because a modal is a separate element. Well, what we do is take that original image, and I'll get a little more deep into this in a second, but we take that image, we open a modal dialog with that image inside the modal dialog. So it's two different images now with the same source. You put it on top of where it is on the page, and then you scale it to the viewport. Now, there's some problems that you run into with this. If you just try to, there's a little bit of math to figure out, okay, what's the width and the height? What are the dimensions of the image? Do I need to scale it more, X or more X or more Y? But the problems get compounded by Safari, and specifically iOS Safari. Both Mac OS and iOS do this, but it's worse on iOS. If you start with an image that's small and you try to transform it above, transform scale, 2, 3, 4, Safari only will have the image quality that was originally rendered. So even if you have a bigger image, a really, really big image, if you render it really small, that's the best quality you're going to get. So it scales up. When you scale it up, you lose the quality. So it's a big problem if you're trying to have something that enhances the image, makes it bigger. So instead, what you have to do to do all this is figure out in reverse how big it's going to get. When you're doing the zooming and you put the dialog on top of the image, you scale the image down, so between 0 and 1. And then as the animation goes, you eventually scale to a scale of 1. And that scale of 1 is whatever is the biggest the image can get in the viewport. You also have to take into account what's the maximum size of the image and make sure you don't scale beyond the maximum size of the image and make the image blurry. So if the image is 800 by 800, but you're on a really big screen, you only want to zoom to that amount. So there's a lot of little things that go into it, but to wrap that initial bit back up, there's a dialogue that's invisible that gets put on the screen. And the image that we're zooming is put on top of the image that's underneath the dialogue. And then we scale it up to the viewport. And when you click on it again or press escape to get out of this modal experience, it does the opposite and puts it back down.
I like the troubleshooting, like you explaining the problem and how you tackle it. A few questions. So first, let's say that the image is very tall. So the height is very big. Do you always make it fit the viewport, or would you allow it to be scrollable once you zoom in?
It always fits. It always fits the viewport, whatever that is. And so, whether that's a feature, I mean, that's what I made it do. But I mean, whether that works for everyone or not is kind of up to them. But it is a way to see one image, that might be bigger than your viewport, actually in the viewport. But it just depends on what your use case is with that. And there's a use case where you scroll down and maybe you scroll past an image, and because it's taller than your viewport and you've got a little bit of it in the window, you click on that, it comes down, and it may actually, if it's taller and wider, it may just shrink it so it fits into the viewport, but that's what it does.
Okay. And the thing that is actually being scaled up or down is just the image itself, because the model, as you said, you fix its dimensions because you can't tinker with the dimensions of the model. Like you can, but then you would run into problems in a future situation. So you just fix the dimensions of the model to be the entire viewport, and then you just scale up the image that you duplicated and created inside the model.
Yeah, that's right. It also allows for for pinching to zoom and panning around. So you've got to write the code for all that, because there's also code for gesture, like swiping, as well as mouse wheel. And in the past, what I allowed for was when you would swipe, it would just scroll the page and put the thing back, put the image back where it went to before. But that was a very difficult thing to achieve with the modal, with the animation, all this stuff. So what I've got now is the way that I think most modals are supposed to work, where you disable the scroll on the body. And then if someone does a scrolling action, so if it's like a mouse wheel or a gesture or something, it doesn't actually scroll anything, but it will make the image unzoom. That's the word I use, unzoom, and then you can keep going about your business on the page.
You mentioned a few accessibility concerns, and you mentioned like the ability to close on ask and etc. How did you created the model itself, the model element? Because we now have a dialogue element on HTML. I say now, it's been there for a very long time, but I find that very few people actually use it, and a lot of people just create a div and put it on as a child of the topmost element, sometimes the body itself, and then they position it whatsoever, basically create a portal, right? And then you have to write all those accessibility stuff yourself from scratch. How was your approach? Did you use the div and created all the accessibility features from that, or did you use a dialogue element?
So in my initial creation used, this going back to 2016, I went and looked at the first handful of commits, and I was doing a full react-dom.render into because now we have react.create portal, but create portal is essentially just saying, hey, document create element div, add that div to the body and put something inside of it. So that's what I was doing, but I was doing a react.render. This was probably before react.dom. It was just react.render or react.dom.render, that equivalent. So it was rendering a whole new React, what do you call that? A React tree, in essence, like a whole new React app instance. And over time, I was using a div, and as I got more skilled in accessibility, I said, oh, okay, there's a bunch of rules here. We got to figure this out, because if you were just using a div, even if you use aria modal true and role equals dialogue on a div, the browser is not going to disable all of the content in the background. It's not going to hide it. So you could theoretically, keep pressing tab and go down the screen, or you could use a screen reader and read the content behind that. And so you've got to, well, back then, what you had to do was conditionally go and put ARIA hidden on everything and tab index -1 on everything else, or create what's called a tab trap, so that you could never tab outside of the modal. Maybe it would wrap around. Well, there's not really anything to wrap around in this component. But anyway, that was a very big headache, and I didn't do it right for a while. Eventually, when the dialogue element became, baseline generally available, I refactored to use that, but that comes with its own problems as well. So the dialogue element comes with like a placeholder overlay. It comes with its own overlay style. I don't know if that's different per browser, but it comes with some default browser style sheet. So I didn't want that because I wanted to animate in my background. I didn't want it to be instant. So I wanted to animate in the background. I also found at the time, I think it's improved a bit. If you didn't have role equals dialogue on the dialogue element, then not every browser screen reader combination would work quite like you wanted it to. Same thing with having ARIA modal true on there. But I mean, you would need the ARIA modal true anyway, but the role equals dialogue was something that needed to be added. So I'm getting into the weeds here, but I am using the dialogue element now, and I'm using a little bit of its internal on close, and also I think it's called like open modal or show modal, I think is what the native API is for that. But yeah, I'm using a dialogue now, and with that you get all that stuff that I just talked about being a problem. You get almost all of that for free, which is great. With back to the native style sheet overlay background color, with that, it's very simple. Like in the CSS for the project, I just disable that, and I do my own sort of rendering in the component and state in the component to let me know when I should be animating something in or not, or transitioning something like the background in. So you can have like a white background, you can have a black background, any color you want. And then that should animate in, and that's all customizable if you want to change the CSS.
Okay, a lot of that is just, I would guess, doesn't depend a lot on React. So I wonder, why didn't you separate it, or maybe you already did, why didn't you separated the core native functionalities in a native lib, and then you just use that in the React lib, because then you can also allow other frameworks to do it as well?
So I spent a lot of time in maybe 2019 trying to do that. So I renamed the project from React Medium Image Zoom to just GitHub/rpierce/image zoom, and I had a branch in there where I was doing it as a mono repo. So my plan was to have a core vanilla JS library, and then have React and get some of my friends that know Vue and Angular and whatever to create wrappers for it. So then you could have packages for each one, and now we've got the core functionality, which is all native stuff, all sorted out, and then you've got wrappers for each framework, each environment, whatever people need. That was a great plan, and I started doing that. And I thought I'd settled on an API, but it kind of fizzled out. I worked on it for a couple of weeks while on vacation, which was probably not how I should have spent my vacation. But maybe this was early 2020. I forget. It might have been the beginning of COVID. But that I worked on that, found an API, but then I ran into issues. The code was getting kind of ugly, and it fell to the side, and I left it for a while. I came back and looked at it, and I wasn't satisfied. So I renamed the project back to React Medium Image Zoom. And what I wanted to do was fix a few things, add a few features, and then see where the project was. And if it made sense, and if I had the time, then start thinking about something else. And I started to realize that I maybe just pure vanilla JS wasn't the way I wanted to go. And so I kind of held off on that. And I'll come back to that in just a second. So what I did is I started work that at the time it was version 4. And what version 4 did is very different than what it does right now. So what it does right now was kind of like builds on top of version 3, but version 4, I had this moment where I thought, wouldn't it be cool if whatever someone puts inside of the zoom component, we just zoom that. Doesn't matter what it is, anything, text, divs that have shapes, just whatever it is. Take the bounding box of that stuff that is inside the zoom component, like a child of the zoom component, and just zoom that up to the top. My problem with that was, well, how do you have a button? Oh gosh. And so what I did is I put a button that covered the entire image, so that when you click on it, you're clicking on a button. But then I just had a bunch of issues that I ran into, and I wanted to rectify these for this version 5 thing, and I wanted to also do something that I don't know if anyone else has done, which is support every type of image that you can think of, which is, like I said before, images with object fit, object position, loading equals lazy, doing async loading for it as well. Divs that have a background image, background size, background position, making sure that any picture with whatever the source is, figures, SVGs, you name it. I wanted all of these things to work because I wanted this for myself. And I'd seen other people asking about that in the past. So instead of just doing the vanilla thing, I redid this over a long period of time in version 5. I spent many nights, unfortunately. My wife said she'll listen to this even though she doesn't care about programming. But I spent many nights, after she went to bed, on the couch, losing sleep, getting way less sleep than I should, trying to figure out the math behind, okay, if I have an image element, but I've got object fit contain, and the image is technically, it looks like it's scaled down, and like if you were to look at it in the web inspector, you would see like a blue box around the entire image element, but the actual thing you see is smaller within that. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the exact math that browsers use to scale that down based on a lot of different things, based on the image, natural width and height of the image, how much space does it have to work with, what is the object position? Object position can be pixels, it can be 25%, 75%, you name it. There's all these different scenarios. How do we put an image on top of that in the modal to scale that up and make it look like it's one seamless experience where you just click and it gets big, and you click again and it gets small? So I spent a lot of time on that, and that's where I got to with this version 5. And now that things have kind of slowed down, I've got most of the features that I need. Still some bugs here and there, but most of the features that I need, that's where I think is a good spot to stop and say, do I have the time to think about making this maybe into a web component? So yeah, I'm not there yet, but I have two young daughters, and so I don't really have that time. And I have many other interests as well for open source things and little tools that I want to exist, but that's where I am now.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I was actually asking it because I was personally interested because I use Angular a lot, and I really like the library that you created, and I think it's a great project. It's like that thing that you can easily reuse for other projects, like whatever you have a place where you are showing images. I think most blogs could benefit from it, honestly. They all could and should have this functionality. It's a really nice functionality. So I would love being able to use this in other projects that are not React based. But yeah, I completely understand your context. And honestly, just the fact that this exists in React is already a blessing on its own. So nothing to complain on that. Crazy to see to understand the complexity of it, right? Because once you look at it, you think, oh, okay, like I would be able to do it real quick, like a day's work. But then you see, oh no, like there are so many details. It's like, oh my God, really hard to do that really well. I also noticed on the, at least on the first storybook example, that the image already starts with the width fully expanded. Do you have a way to customize that so that it actually starts with the width that is being shown and then it expands from it? You know, like if you have an example where you're just showing a little window of it, then it starts with that. And as it grows, it expands the rest of the image. And once it closes the same way.
Yeah, kind of. And it's not 100% seamless. But so in the examples, there's a div image gallery where you can change the aspect ratio. And this is on the storybook examples. And so you can change an aspect ratio from like 16:9 to 4:3. And that changes the shape of the, of the div that the image is a background image of. And what the way that it works is it figures out, okay, is it background size cover? Is it background size contain? You name it. And then when it does the like the zooming for a background cover, what it'll try to do is say, okay, is the image itself bigger than its container? If so, when we put that image in the modal on top, try to take that into account to represent exactly what the image is going to look like. So I don't have a way right now of like unfurling, like a flag unfurls, unfurling the edges as it zooms to get bigger. What it does right now is it puts the image on top of where that one is. At the original, with the original images, like full dimensions. So like let's say you've got a really, really, really tall image, but it's in a square and with background size cover, it will, oh, sorry, you might hear children in the background now.
No worries.
Instead of just zooming that displayed box that's on the screen, which is what I did in version 4, what it does is it will zoom the original image and try to make it look seamless. But what it does is it will, if you've got that little box, it'll put the image on top of that box and then zoom it. If I had a way to sort of, like I said, unfurl or like slowly reveal part of the image, then like I would totally accept contributions for that. To make it seem like it's just growing out from the box, that would be great. Alas, I don't have a good idea for how to do that reliably.
Gotcha. Yeah, it does. It's way more complex when you say it out loud with all the details.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Many nights were lost to just going cross-eyed, trying to figure out, the right calculation to make this make sense for every use case possible. Which, by the way, not everyone has that use case. And so another thing that would be good long-term for this project is like right now, I think bundled and minified and gzipped, it's like 4.89 kilobytes, but that's, to me, is still too large. I would prefer to potentially have, well, I guess that's the whole package. That's the whole package. I would prefer to have different components that include increasing amounts of complexity, so that when you only have one base case, that's maybe I have a regular image, nothing special. I only want the code for that, so that tree shaking would eventually tree shake away everything that's not being used, so that you get the bare minimum stuff that you need. Right now, the logic for figuring out all of the magic that goes into, like I said, the object fit, the background images, all of that is mixed in with the other code to try to figure out, okay, what kind of image is it? How big do I make it on the screen? What other styles do I need to apply? What kind of transform? What kind of scale? All of that is mixed together. I think it'd be really neat eventually to separate all that so that people's actual bundle size and impact would just be less. I wouldn't do those as like separate packages. I feel like that's a bit much. But if I could tree shake out everything, that would be awesome.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Dude, I'm really enjoying this conversation. Honestly, like I am very curious about this and I'm liking the intricacies of how you got to it. But I realized that we have been talking for more than 40 minutes already. So I apologize, the audience. I think
Sorry.
we should maybe start wrapping up. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we start wrapping up?
In general, or about the project?
Yeah, it could be about the project, like anything maybe that I didn't ask or we didn't cover, but that you feel is interesting enough that should be mentioned.
I did just remember that I didn't answer your question about the view transitions and stuff. I could answer that real quick. I don't know how that would work accessibility wise. That's my only concern. I would love for anything I make for there to be some sort of native way to do that, so that my project doesn't have to exist anymore. I think that that's like the end goal for really all of my work, is I want it to be made so that it's not needed anymore. Because maintaining something, it takes effort, it takes time. It's an extra dependency that someone has to maintain themselves and say, oh, did Robert break something? Oh, do I actually want this upgrade? It's a lot of work overall. So if the browsers could come up with something, I doubt they would for this, but if they had something, that would be great. If view transitions could solve this easily, I would happily, deprecate this and say it's in maintenance mode. But we're not. I don't know if it's there yet.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. I think that's a good end goal when you're creating something that you want to be flexible and generic enough. It's gonna be tough for browsers to actually implement it with the level of customization that like it's a very specific feature. But who knows? They have implemented a few niche stuff in the past that maybe it turns out. Yeah, man. Okay, awesome. And Peter, do you have any questions, notes, anything else you want to say before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, so I think my question is going to be on the web component side. So I think I probably wanted to get an idea of why you actually use web component, the aspect of it, maybe just for viewers, so maybe for people who wonder what web components are, how did that play into the package here?
Yeah, I think so. The reason I want to go with a web component is I hold this potentially spicy idea close to my heart. That is, the further away you get from a core technology, the harder something is to maintain. And with a web component, what I see there is something that is native to the web. Now, it's gotten a lot more support in the last couple of years. I think that if you think about web components, not in the same way as you do a React component, where you've got a tree of components that have render cycles and everything, but if you think of them as a decorator, something that really enables progressive enhancement, then I think this is something that fits perfectly there. Where I've got an image, if I'm rendering something on the server, I don't need all this extra stuff. I don't need all this extra stuff around, but clicking and zooming and all that. It's just an image. And if someone's got JavaScript disabled, which like I do by default on every site I go to, I enable it if the site doesn't work. But for people that have JavaScript disabled, like they shouldn't be impacted negatively. So they should be able to use my image imaging library or a form or whatever, without extra hassle. And so if I make this into a web component, it can be something that people fetch however they want, through npm, through a CDN, whatever. And if they wrap their image in this web component, then they'll get that extra decoration, that extra functionality, but it's something that's not critical to how their website looks. Like I don't want to make a change and block somebody's next build or give them warnings or errors because I included a document or a window reference, that kind of thing. So I'd rather just be able to be applied to any framework anywhere. That's why I'm thinking web component.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have them. All right, man. So let's do a quick round of promos and then we can wrap it up. So you are a very humble person given all the work that you have put in out. But I do think that maybe there could be something that we can promote from what you're doing, at least your website. I think you have some really valuable content there. But yeah, is there anything you'd like to promote to the audience? Maybe some material for them to go look at on their own time?
Yeah, sure. So I've got, so my website, the short URL for it is just rwp.im or robertwpierce.com. And, I've got a number of blog posts on there from, Haskell to functional programming in JavaScript with Lambda and, rewriting things like, like map functions and, like array prototype.map and then going just off the rails with that. But most of the content I've written on there is because it's something that I've explained or worked to, help level somebody else up on. And I thought, maybe I'll just write this down because I've explained this 5 times. So if somebody listening to this has, React, TypeScript, JavaScript, Bash, Haskell, specifically Haskell, the static site generator, which my site is built with. If people have any, take a look at my site and say, well, I would love to know more about X, and I have no clue. Send me an email, contact me somehow, and I'll write something up, and we can make a blog post about it, and you can read about it, and we can share it with the world. So I'm happy to share whatever I can, and learn a few things along the way myself.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, and I do think there are a lot of interesting content out there that you created. So would definitely recommend the audience to go check out some of your other posts. Whereas for me, I'm just gonna mention the 2 companies that produce the show again. So if you're interested in other subjects besides React, Top and Devs has a lot of other podcasts as well. I host myself a podcast about Angular, but there are others as well. So definitely check out Top and Devs if you want to explore some other technology topics. And if you are a company or you know someone that is looking for staff augmentation or outsourcing a particular project, we definitely recommend checking out Unvoid. Is UNVOID, like the opposite, void.com. They have this really interesting business model that is very, very client friendly. Like clients don't have to pay by the hour, which tends to be a huge problem for them because things usually go over time and over budget, and then they lose their predictability. But yeah, do definitely check out Envoy.com if you know someone that has problems with traditional agency models and is looking to explore something different. So yeah, to me, it's going to be just that. How about you, Peter?
Okay, yeah. So for me, nothing really much. I just want to paste a course on web component as well, since that was the idea behind the package as well. I think the course is about building like simple projects with web component using Google's leads. So yeah, I think it's just worth checking out, since I think web components was used in this package, and it will really really helpful for the users to actually have an idea of what web components are useful they are for in development. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to being here. I really appreciate you taking up the time, and I know that you have a lot of other content, so feel free to hit me up whenever you want, and we can schedule another one. I will look you up on LinkedIn and connect with you. So feel free to reach me out there if you want to hop in again. And yeah, man, really appreciate. At the beginning, you said this was your first podcast. I gotta say, you handled it very well. I really like your didactics. I think you're great at this, man. So yeah, do check out some others. I think you have a way for this kind of content. And for the audience, thank you so much for sticking with us for so long. This was definitely a long one. I hope you learned a lot from it. I know I did.
Thanks a lot.